the first thing that we're interested in is give us, you have such an interesting seat in that you come from a very robust financial background. You've built LionTree into a juggernaut. You are partnered with all different types of people, all different types of companies. What do you see happening right now in the media landscape, especially as it relates to what's happening with capital and with technology and distribution and legacy media versus new media? Like, how do you see the media world?
Wow. Well, it's great to be here with you. And especially on video, because I feel like you and I were two of the people that started off talking about audio before almost anyone. And now everyone's gotten on board with audio, right? Because, just I think this week, Facebook and Apple are now talking about audio as like the medium. And so I think that media used to be, only a few years ago, thought of as being kind of an old thing, right? Like when I say the word media, people used to think about like, 8 o'clock television, for half an hour sitcoms. And now media is all of a sudden all about not just like Clubhouse and Barstool and all the things that take you forward in life and exciting dynamics, but also about, the auctions of NFTs and, how do you put capital, like you said, together with the new social commerce platforms, and how do you marry media with anything? And so I think media is everything. I mean, if you have a business or you're an individual and you have expression and you have an idea or you're a brand, not just personally, but a company that has a product, and you don't have a media strategy around it, no one's going to watch it and no one's going to see it, and it's not going to have the benefit of scale. Because the thing about media is we can sit here and we can talk to each other, and a lot of people can listen and a lot of people can view it. It probably is only akin to capital in the benefit of scale. Capital can work while you're sleeping. Media can work all the time. And so I think you need media attached to anything to become the business. And I always say, like, there's a relationship between any creator and commerce these days. So media is now me-dia. Everyone has their own individual expression and they have their own individual business model. And you're sitting on top of the ecosystems and the distribution models that have come before us now. Whether it's YouTube or Facebook or any distribution model, anyone can create a business around these platforms. And that's the new world of media.
And how do you help the legacy companies get their head around that? Like, do you think they're going to get there? Will the Paramounts and the Viacoms and the WWE, I don't know if you would call actually WWE a legacy media company, but NBC, Universal, like, do you think they'll cross that transom too?
Oh, they have. I mean, it's amazing. Like, this is a situation where the consumer or the individual has led the companies to the promised land. And sometimes it's the other way around, where the companies tell the consumer, here are the new products, please consume them. In this case, the consumer has won. The consumer said, this is the way that we want to take on the new media landscape. And the companies have adjusted. I mean, and I'll tell you how it's happened. So it used to be that there's been a defined ecosystem, a finite model. So everything is packaged in broadcasting or in a sports league or in a certain arena, right, in a physical location. And it was packaged when they wanted to show it to you and you had to go find it, right? Now everything is direct to consumer, right? So direct to consumer has been demanded by the consumer, saying, I want things directly when I want it, right? It's kind of, video on demand. It's either subscription video on demand or it's advertising video on demand. It's SVOD or AVOD in the acronyms format. So these now have broken down the models, and now instead of creating a finite value system around those things like it used to be, you've now unlocked them into an infinite value stream. So when content goes direct to consumer, they take on an infinite value stream because there's no longer constrained. And I know you and I share the same philosophy of like no constraints in life, right? We will build our own guardrails to create the ultimate value creation, but we don't want artificial constraints. And so the media companies have bought into that. And so that's plus. So Disney Plus,
Right.
Paramount Plus, you put a plus at the end of your name, that indicates we are breaking down the barriers in favor of the consumer to take on this content in new formats, and not just new formats, but aligning the economics in a more equal way. So the creator shares the economics with the producers, with the media companies, and provides them to the consumer in a way that's shared with the writers, with the producers, with the artists. And that's broken down the ecosystems in a much more aligned way, not sliced and diced for the benefit of just like, economics that can be monetized in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's very smart. It's also interesting, I think, from your shoes or in your shoes as a banker. I don't really think about you as a banker, but for people who are putting together like companies, I think what's interesting is your job, or people like you, their jobs have gotten so much more dimensional. You're looking at a commerce engine, plus content creation, plus production, plus distribution. And I think that's also very interesting, which is whereas people's expertise used to be, hey, let's put this big juggernaut with this big juggernaut, we'll create a bunch of cost savings, we'll slap them together and have a new powerhouse. It's actually become far more nuanced and technical, in my opinion. Like even in my time, when I was at AOL, we were buying all sorts of companies and we just mashed them up. We would mash brands together, create cost savings, package things to have more scale so we could compete with Facebook and Google. And that was the name of the game. And now the name of the game is take a brand, find a content production engine, create a commerce plugin, find technology distribution, or partner exclusively on distribution. Like that. Tell me a little bit about how you see that role changing.
Well, it's funny. I'm smiling because you've come a long way since AOL.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love how you're building Barstool. You've come a long way since even you got the Barstool. But I ask people all the time, like, what their predictions are for the rest of this year and for the rest of even this decade. Because if you sat here a year and a half ago, anyone that made any predictions was completely wrong. And usually predictions are wrong. But in this last case, no one would have predicted a pandemic if you sat here in February of 2020. If you look now, what is the most unpredictable thing that you can think of, and usually can be pretty provocative. One of my predictions is that Zoom could become the next AOL, because everyone loves Zooming right now, but it's not really a tool set that has a lot of dynamicism around it, because I would prefer to be seeing you in person and traveling around and having creative energies, and a lot of technologies that are remote will evolve a lot, but Zoom has been very powerful, just like AOL was very powerful. But how will it evolve? And there'll be other forms of it in the future. But anyway, I think the combination of commerce and content and social is here to stay. But you have to subtract the politics, subtract the influencing and messaging. It's kind of where TikTok has really thrived, where you kind of remove the kind of the political dynamics, which they don't have, which Instagram and YouTube have suffered with, or Facebook have suffered with. And people just want to have the experience of conversation based on things that are real and based on things that they can transact in first. And I think more and more platforms like TikTok will emerge. And there are a lot of earlier stage versions of TikTok, much earlier stage, that we're working with and we're investing in, cultivating and advising. And that's one big area. I think more versions of audio. And remember, Netflix even this week had numbers that were down, actually, because they're seeing a lot more competition. Just like Amazon lost some market share for the first time this quarter, because guess what? Direct to consumer is now a thing for everybody, not just Amazon. But remember this, people take 11 hours per day for their leisure time. Doesn't really grow that much, maybe 2 or 3% a year, but 11 hours per day is a lot of time for leisure time. So it's been overweight in video, and now people are putting gaming in there and audio in there. So the share shift of those 11 hours is happening. And we really believe in models that have a online and offline combination. So where you live physically and virtually in the same area, that's the thing of the future that we're focusing on. And it's not so much futuristic as it sounds. So online dating has been one of those things for a while, right? You search, if you do search for dates online, then you meet someone physically. That's one of those things. E-commerce, you find your clothing and in online format, and your clothing is delivered physically in front of you. But now you go to a basketball game or a hockey game, in case for your passion in hockey, and you go and you watch it physically. People are watching it virtually.
Yeah.
That will happen in concert. So people have a choice. We talked about like WrestleMania, right? Like you could go physically and watch it in Tampa, and you could live stream it on Peacock at the same time. And that'll happen in Fortnite and in other areas as well. And so, you will have the ability to scale all those businesses virtually while people are also watching it physically. The confluence of those two things, what's more valuable down the road, a Picasso on the wall or digital art,
Right.
An NFT? And that sounds like a crazy concept for people that are purists, but how many times do you print out the pictures on your phone and hang them on the wall? Never. You are very comfortable with the value of the photographs on your phone being in your phone, and you love them there. You don't ever print them and put it on your wall. So that's a virtual digital version of a photo that you love there more than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting. I agree with so much of that. We are very focused on digital and physical. I think that's actually, I think our next frontier will be far more physical. We will obviously innovate in digital, NFTs, et cetera. My thing that's happening though is that it's like the first wave of things sometimes are so obvious. It's not super creative. It doesn't create a lasting value proposition for a consumer. I'm like you, which is I'm almost post audio at this point. I think that the pandemic changed things to be really dominantly video. And then what we're very interested in is I think people are starved for physical experiences made better or augmented by digital experiences. So I see the world the same way. What do you think about like a Clubhouse? Like seeing Clubhouse with a, I think it was a $4 billion valuation just pisses me off. But how? Why? Because if Clubhouse, which is in my opinion, not working, I think it's like House Party. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was on House Party every night. It was like everybody was talking all night. We were virtually gathered. And then like 2 weeks later, I was like, I'm so sick of this. I don't want to see everybody. I don't want to be on House Party all night. I never used it again. I think the same thing is happening with Clubhouse. Like it was great. There was a moment in time where a moderated conversation was novel and it felt good. And it was very esoteric. And Robinhood was on there or Elon was on there or whatever. And then Twitter copies it quickly and Facebook's going to copy it quickly. And, everybody else is going to, I don't know. Like, I just don't see it.
Do you feel the same way about podcasts?
No, I think that podcasts are, sorry, my last thing on Clubhouse is that I think like the constraint of 5,000 people per room was a great novelty, but they had to scale it much faster. Like I would never put Dave on Clubhouse ever because 5,000 people is like, just a waste of time. He can talk to 1 million people on Twitter. And they gave a big pitch about that exclusivity being really meaningful. And I think they've overplayed that, but
we play into something called scaled intimacy. You need for any model to work to have scale, but it needs to feel intimate at the same time. So if you can accomplish scaled intimacy where you have a certain level of warmth at the same time, right? Exactly.
Completely. Like it's worth creating an intimate conversation. You probably want 25,000, you probably want 25,000 people in it. Podcasts, I'm still very bullish on. I think that there will be so much acquisition of podcast IP. I think podcast IP will drive the future of all lengths of content. Like the creativity, the personality coming out of podcasting is amazing. I'm very, very bullish on that. I think we're at a point though where there's so much fragmentation. When we created our podcasts, some of our podcasts in 2016, we didn't have any competition. We were the only fan first podcast in sports, let's say. And now there's thousands. So
but I think it's all about community, right? So you can have a lot of volume of something, but what you need is a community. It's more important than just audience for audience sake or even reach. You need a community, right? So it used to be that the universal metric of media, when media was a mass media audience, everyone got together and watched the same show like Seinfeld and Friends or whatever it was. 30 million people watched it and everyone got together at the same time. The universal metric in that world was love. Everyone wanted to be loved. Okay, that was the universal metric. Now we live in a fractured media world because everyone has their own media and everyone has their own podcast, everyone has everything. In that world, in this world, the universal metric is not love, it's attention. Everyone wants attention. But that doesn't mean you're going to always have great things said about you every single day. But for you to be able to handle a world where universal's metric is attention, you have to be authentic. You have to know who you are, because things are going to be said left and right about you. The best people that perform in that world are people like Cardi B. That's why, like, Trump did really well, because like didn't really care. Maybe Dave does really well in worlds like this because like he just is who he is, right? And you have to just be authentic when the metric is attention, right? We need to move to a world where the universal metric maybe is impact. Like how you impact the world and how you measure impact. And that's why we're getting to climate change as an asset class and things like that, where you can measure impact in society instead. These are the kind of metrics that are moving, but you need to create like communities along the way that are engaging. So the reason why your podcast thrives is because you have an engaged community that believe and love the energy and the kind of like back and forth dialogue. Maybe this one excluded, but like normally you have this kind of energy, and people follow it, and that community will follow you. That's media from the beginning of time. By the way, people that follow a sports team have had that, right? That's an unlock, back to original part of the conversation. That's infinite value of content. Content is a brand that has an affinity attached to it, which is a community. People that like the New York Yankees from the beginning of time have stuck with the New York Yankees, no matter where they are or which platform they're on, audio or video or gaming, whatever it is, and they stick with it with an infinite value system. The community and the brand sticks with you if you have an engaged community, no matter what. That is media, that's content.
I love that, Aryeh. I think that is exactly right. I think it's so hard to create community now. Like, we're so fortunate because we have deeply authentic people. We have a very big community that's built around us, and we have thick skin. And we understand the metrics of attention and how to optimize for those metrics in a non-algorithmic way, right? I would say one of the things we are best at is having the pulse of attention and being able to, from a human and a content perspective, double down on attention. The platforms obviously do it through technology. But if you were giving advice to people looking to start out, or to grow community or to garner attention, what's your advice to them in terms of how to achieve it?
A, be authentic. B, have something to say. And C, have a consistent message. And D, you have to want the attention. Like, I don't really crave the attention or want the attention. I'm here because I love you and I love our relationship, and it's great to talk about this topic with you, and you energize me, so it's really interesting for us to talk about it. Usually we talk about this and so much more depth in private,
right?
But you have to really want the attention, and if you want the attention, that means you have to have some kind of impact around it. But that has to be consistent over a long period of time, because to build a really great model around a community, around a media business, around a brand, around your brand, you need to have scale. And that scale has to have a community over a long period of time that builds and builds. If you go to the US Open tennis tournament and you look around, you're going to see the same brands year after year that have staying power. Some brands break through, but not a lot of them. So like Barstool has broken through, but it's not easy to do that. It happens, these are the exceptions. It's not easy to break through. You do that because you have something to say and it's edgy and it stands for something. So I always have a saying that, like, conventional thinking is typically right, but seldom profitable, which really means that like you can, like, it feels very comfortable to live in the middle of the herd, to think like the masses, but you're not going to make a difference. You're not going to make any money. So you have a risk when you're a contrarian, when you think differently, when you're playing on the edge and you think outside of the box, you're taking a risk. You could lose, but you're not going to win big, or you're not going to make an impact unless you do those things. So you have to basically take a risk, but it has to be an authentic risk. It can't just be taking a risk for the sake of it.
Yeah, you're not, I agree with that. It's so funny. I've had this luxury the last, almost 6 years, or, 5.5 years, where we just have been in our own bubble, and we've just done things our way, right? We didn't know if it was the right way. We didn't know anyone who had done that before. We didn't ask, we didn't care. And it enabled us to build this company that was truly authentic above anything else, because we never asked or engaged with anyone who thought differently. And it's interesting, now I'm plugged into bigger companies, Sirius, Penn, et cetera, and you see a different type of thinking, and a different worldview that isn't from the edge, which is very uncomfortable for us. Like, it's very uncomfortable. If you're on the edge, to talk to someone in the herd is tough, because for me, it's like PTSD, where I'm like,
different language.
It is a different language.
Well, but I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples of what I'm talking about. So there's a difference between my saying, right now, less than 50% of retail sales are done on e-commerce, less than 50%. But I can tell you definitively, in our lifetime, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, the majority of retail sales will probably be e-commerce, right? That will happen, and that will be a trend that you can bet on, invest in, build businesses around, okay? That is something that's a trend that I can get behind, that you can literally build businesses around, and we're in banking on that and helping companies around that. That's different than saying, when someone says during a pandemic, big companies announcing, we are literally letting our employees work from home forever. That is like a borderline fraudulent statement, because that will never be true. That will never happen. That is literally a reaction from a crisis to extrapolate forever.
Right.
There's a gray area of life.
Yeah.
Where you will have a hybrid. Some people will want to work at some point back in some, creative energy together, and some people want to work from home, and some people want to work out and about in the field with clients. Exactly. There's a hybrid there. So, like, I wouldn't make definitive statements of being just, kind of like the simplistic, decisions of life. I would live in the gray area and try to be comfortable there. But that's different from having a sort of like obvious business trend that you can bet on.
So, all right, before I let you go, I've always thought, one of the things I love about you is I think you're so thoughtful about the future. Like, I don't think people see that in you so much. And it's always so surprising for me how you, not surprising, but it's inspiring for me how you always make time to think about, really thoughtfully about the future. So if you were to leave this pod with things that you are thinking about for the future, not predictions, but things you see in the future, things you'll be thinking more about, like impact, what would those things be?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that it depends how far out you want to go, but I definitely think that you saw China roll out a digital currency, right? So I think that we do a lot of mergers and acquisitions of companies, and we try to do that in a way to kind of optimize companies' ability to create synergies and come together for the benefit of building new businesses, et cetera, right? What if we start doing that for countries? Think about like, but what if countries start expanding again? We haven't seen countries start exploring new territories, like Russia and Ukraine and China and Taiwan and the US buying Greenland, so like, what if countries start expanding territories all of a sudden? And that's the next step. And maybe currencies are just the first step, where countries will roll out currencies that will be beyond their borders, and then countries will start to expand beyond their borders. Could be an interesting futuristic way of thinking about things.
I mean, like, you're blowing my mind right now. I could talk to you for another 6 hours. I love you. I think you are the best.